be here. I'm excited to learn more about this. Let's continue.
Awesome. Thanks, Mello. And again, thanks, Roy, for being here. So we start with the introduction here. Again, this is Ashton Forbes. I'm at JustXAshton on Twitter. I'm going to go ahead and just start my recording. Hopefully I can get this onto YouTube as well for you guys here the next day for people who want to watch. I'm the author of The Real Story of MH370. You can find all my work on X with the hashtag MH370x, or you can find it in my highlights. So as Mello just pointed out, from the investigation standpoint, this is the story of extremely intelligent people and talented people who came together on social media to find the truth. When they were censored, I took up the reins, and we've been telling the story since then. Unity should be the theme of these videos. In a divided world, these can bring us together. People may ask, why have we not gone to the media? The answer is we have. And we've also gone to prominent UFOlogy experts as well, and they, in general, will not respond. That's why I wrote the letter to Congress, which we're going to go over here recently, because I think that's the next step in order to get a formal investigation into these videos and prove their authenticity. No major media to this point has contacted me, not a single one. It seems like it's coordinated. They are willing to put a kid who saw aliens in his backyard in Vegas on national news, but they won't come and talk to me, somebody who has all this evidence lined up, who's challenging the official narratives and the official experts. You would think that this completely alternative, plausible theory that uses more evidence than any other theory to date would be compelling. However, I find the fact that they haven't talked to us very telling. So why are we doing this? The answer is we want to redeem and vindicate everyone who is gaslit, the pilot, the witnesses, the family members of the victims, the leaker of the videos, everyone else who was lied to. That's the main intent behind this. As we've uncovered the investigation, we realized that, sadly, this being MH370 on the plane is not even the most important part of these videos. What we're also seeing here is advanced technology that has been kept hidden from us that will potentially prove that there's a reverse engineering program in play, or that what we're seeing here could even be non-human intelligence. Ultimately, I will not tell you what you want to believe. What I want to do is present the evidence, and I will also tell you my personal opinion, and then we'll leave it up to the world to decide. As for mass media, who do we want to be able to talk to? Really anyone with a very large audience so that we can get this information out to the public. In an ideal world, I would like to talk to people like Sean Ryan, Bill Maher, Tucker Carlson, or of course, Joe Rogan, because I believe if we can convince these people that the videos are real, then we can convince the whole world that the videos are real. So one of my favorite lines is that you all here, you the followers, the people who have been listening, absorbing this information, you get to be part of the greatest spy story ever told. The real story of MH370. So first thing I'm going to do is jump into the letter to Congress, because at this point right now, I'm looking at it firsthand. This has over 832,000 views. That's how compelling this information is to the people that are reading. And as I go through it, I will add some additional information onto it so that you can give a little bit more context as well. So dear Congress, my name is Ashton Forbes. I'm disclosing the most important videos in the history of the world. All of this information is publicly available. I would like to state that I have a top secret U.S. government clearance as part of my job as a contractor. My job has nothing to do with advanced technology. I'm only stating this to establish my credibility. I am not bound by an NDA. This is not a hoax. This is not disinformation. This is not misinformation. I will also add this is not to distract from anything going on right now politically or on the disclosure movement. This is also not an alien invasion. You don't need to believe me because everything that I'm saying is verifiable. It can be looked into. It can be confirmed. What I'm requesting is a public hearing. I am willing to testify in front of Congress or the Senate as to the authenticity of these videos and explain every aspect of them. I would also invite physics experts to validate the science that we see on display. The videos in question are that of the true fate of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. On March 7th, 2014, at 1840 UTC, or just about there, at the Nicobar Islands. One is of an MQ-1C Gray Eagle with a thermal layer that was manually added by the leaker, and the other is a 3D battlefield space produced by the SIBR system, the space-based infrared system, via SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, using data from the spy satellite USA 229, which has a sister satellite next to it, officially classified as debris. This allows for the proven 3D stereoscopic imagery that we see in the satellite video. The oldest archived versions of the videos that we could find come from Regicidanon, a UFO uploader account, who uploaded unrelated videos previously, indicating that they are not the source. Higher quality versions were released later on by other UFO uploaders on YouTube, indicating that neither is potentially the original source. The dates of these videos are damning. When we look at the satellite video, we can see that in the description it says, received March 12th, 2014. That is only 4 days after the events of Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. So unless you believe that Red-Sided Non-Account is somehow involved in hoaxing these videos, there's simply not enough time for these videos to be fabricated in any way, shape, or form. The confirmed upload date of this is May 19th, 2014. That again leaves a very small window of just 72 days. If you're listening to the podcast that I just did, a Marvel Studios expert weighed in and said that it would take at least a minimum of 6 months just to collect the background information required to be able to develop these footage and present it in a convincing way. So there's no chance that 72 days would be enough time for even a team of experts to put this together. The second video, MQ-1C Gray Eagle, has description received June 5th, 2014, uploaded June 13th, 2014, which is just weeks after the first footage was leaked to the internet. I'd also like to point out that in the satellite video, it says source protected. Other footage that this person had received would normally say source, email, or other mundane things, indicating that someone who sent this to them sent classified information. Furthermore, the time between the footage being received and time being the footage being uploaded, specifically on the satellite video, we believe indicates that this user, Red-Sided Non, had to actually be convinced that what they were seeing is real, for the same reasons why we could not believe the footage to be real. So many people would ask, why now? Because only in 2023 do we have the basis to understand these videos to be real. I would like to state for the record at this point that I saw the thermal MQ-1C drone back in 2014, and even myself did not have a basis to understand for it to be real and ignored it. We ignored these videos for 9 years. We needed to have the 2017 DoD Navy UAP videos to understand what FLIR, forward-facing infrared videos, looks like. We also needed the 2019 Trump satellite picture to understand what the capabilities are for a satellite. That satellite was found out to be USA 224, which was released in 2011, the same year that USA 229 was sent up. So we expect similar capabilities from the video that we see. We also needed 2020 scientific papers that show wormholes are humanly traversable. There were released no less than 3 scientific papers that were released that show that a wormhole is within the theoretical bounds of physics, that it does not necessarily require exotic matter, that humans could survive the effects of going through a wormhole, and perhaps even most importantly, that a double-sided shell could be created around an object, an electromagnetic kind of sphere, if you want to think of it, that would allow for an object to be able to transport through a wormhole. In addition to all these things, we also have recently shown that with LK99, humanity is on the verge of superconductivity if we're not already there. And finally, we would have to have AI in use, which we see now in 2023 through the use of ChatGPT. Without all of these things, the MH370 videos seem like magic. So we know the location of the videos because the investigative group that I started, MH370x, satellite experts use historical amateur trajectories to identify the correct satellite in the correct position to take the 3D stereoscopic video we see. We can see 6 sets of coordinates in the satellite video, which we had initially incorrectly thought were in the South Indian Ocean, until we were able to realize that the only possible location was the Nicobar Islands, because the plane is turning left in both videos, and the satellite coordinate shifts don't depend on what we visually see. This means that the plane is turning south and to the east. The satellite and the witness, Catherine T., who was on a boat going from India to Phuket at the time, both indicate that the time is 1840 UTC, March 7th, 2014. The witness, Catherine T.'s sighting, has been historically recorded, dating back to all the way back to just days after the events. Now, if you're following along, you can also see that there are proofs to all my pieces here showing that the proof of the satellite video is stereoscopic. You can see how the SIBR system works to collect satellite information and create this 3D battlefield space. You can watch the flyover of USA 229, the smoking gun, flying directly over the known flight path of MH370. which shows that there is no chance that the US government did not have eyes on the plane. It's absolutely 100% proven. And you can also see the original blog post that has now been deleted, but we found on the archives of Catherine T., the witness, indicating that she saw an orange glowing plane in the location at the time where our videos were taken. I've been investigating and writing about these videos as a citizen journalist for the past 10 weeks. My X-Corp Twitter following has gone from 30 followers to now, this is outdated, it said 8,500. We're over 14,300 followers now of multidisciplinary backgrounds from the strength of the evidence alone. My handle is @JustXAshton. We have definitively proved every aspect of the videos to be authentic. We know the assets, the time, the location. We actually have over 12 witnesses now, including one that was firsthand saw it within minutes of it happening. We know that there was potentially a fire on board the plane, likely from the lithium-ion batteries, which would have broken containment and caused the halon gas and the bromine chemical to permeate throughout the plane and cause it to glow orange. I urge you to read my piece called The Case of the Glowing Orange Plane, which definitively lays out this evidence. There was no debris field found, which is impossible for a 777 crashing into the ocean. The official search was the most expensive and extensive in history, and it didn't find one single piece of the plane above or below water, despite the fact that the official narrative is that this plane ran out of gas. What that means is there's nowhere else for the plane to go. They searched literally everywhere where this plane could be along the flight path and along the 7th arc. The small amounts of debris that were found are consistent with both the fire scenario and a potential teleportation scenario, which we will discuss. Some of the debris even had burn marks on them. A fire suppression device from a B-77 washed up in the Maldives just weeks later and was not investigated despite the fact that it had visible serial numbers on it. The Maldives were intentionally excluded from the search, despite the fact that there was a witness or witnesses on one of the small islands that reported seeing a plane flying low in the early morning with the red and blue stripe of Malaysian Airlines on it on March 8, 2014. There's also a link here to the witnesses, which we'll talk about in the flight path, but I'll briefly discuss. Mike McKay should be vindicated. He was on an oil rig. He saw the plane starting on fire at exactly 1720 UTC when the plane goes dark. His sighting was misreported. It's been reported that he saw the plane crash. He says he did not see the plane crash. He assumed that the plane must have crashed because he saw a fire. There were a number of witnesses along the coast that heard a loud bang at 1720 UTC, the same time that our plane went dark, indicating there would have been a minor explosion that potentially caused the plane to be depressurized and it entered the emergency event scenario that we know of. In addition to that, there were a number of fishermen who were just miles off the coast between Thailand and Malaysia in the South China Sea. And they report seeing a plane unusually flying very low at 1730 UTC, just 10 minutes after this plane went dark and turned around and turned towards Penang Langkawi International Airport. The reason why you would see the plane flying low is not suicide, but it would be to save the passengers, because if the plane had been depressurized, you need to fly underneath 10,000 feet so that there's enough oxygen for them to be able to breathe. We know that the official narratives are a lie to cover up the technology that was deployed either to save the plane or as espionage to prevent the 20 Freescale semiconductor scientists from going to China, or potentially that they were integral to the technology that we see that gets deployed. We know the plane did not crash into the ocean because the SOSA system didn't hear an acoustic sound. The same system that heard the Titan sub pop and the Navy lied about it for 5 days while oxygen counters were running on every major news channel. The Diego Garcia hydrophones and Western Australia hydrophones also did not hear it. In addition to this, 19 family members of the victims signed a statement begging the government to look into the fact that the victims' phones were ringing for up to 4 days after the event, including one that proved it on national television. You can find the links to this information in my Twitter that shows the videos as well as the information about the statement that was the signed statement that was given to the government. I wish that this being MH370 was the most important part of these videos, because ultimately I'm doing this for the families of the victims, the witness, the leaker, the world has been lied to. However, the most important part of these videos is that they prove conclusively that the US government is hiding superconductivity, teleportation, and potentially free energy from the world. Everything we see in these videos can be explained by science. I do not believe this is aliens in these videos. This is our technology. The reason for this is that the assets are filming the plane before the orb even shows up. The drone cannot catch a 777-200. It must have intercepted it. This is a US government operation in my mind. I do not believe that we could be this secretly advanced without a reverse engineering program. The orbs in this video are ignoring gravity. They're being pulled forward by some type of gravity engine, which we believe is an electromagnetic force creating geodesics that are allowing it to appear as though it's running on train tracks. This is indicated by the dark lines that are in front of them, not coming from behind them. And upon intercept of the plane, are traveling at estimated Mach 3 speeds. The explanation for the unusual triangle pattern that we see, which is simply too exact to be manually controlled, is artificial intelligence, a computer program. You will find links to my pieces called Superconductive Harmonic Orbs and Traversable Wormholes, which go through the science of superconductivity, go through the automation that we see that would be able to create this pattern, as well as the links to the scientific papers for the traversable wormholes that I discussed. The videos do not show an annihilation event because E equals mc squared. Basic science tells us that the energy and mass must go somewhere. So if this was an annihilation event, the zap that we see would be much larger. It potentially would destroy part of the planet. It's not an explosion. It's an endothermic event because it's cold in the thermal, not hot. It's more consistent with an intermediate black hole. It's also not cloaking because we see the smoke at the end of the plane disappears when the plane disappears. If this was a cloaking event, the smoke would continue onward even though the plane had been cloaked from all electromagnetic signatures. That means, ruling everything out, it has to be teleportation based on science or a wormhole. I found out to my own surprise that humanly traversable wormholes are theoretically possible. I did not think that was the case. This singularity is causing a transitional phase state change in the plane, where it is reverting to a wave function and obtaining a probabilistic nature. At least that is what we are speculating based on the most accurate science that we know to date. This is only possible with superconductivity and potentially free energy. And then I have a link to what is macroscopic decoherence, which explains how objects that are macroscopic can acquire quantum properties similar to what we see in the double slit experiment. In that experiment, we see that the wave function breaks down when you attempt to observe which slit a particle goes through. What I believe we're seeing here is a reversal of that, is that we're seeing something that is deterministic in nature changing to probabilistic in nature. This is extremely advanced, and current science cannot fully explain this. At least current public science, I will say. I was also able, miraculously, to identify the leaker of the videos as being Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. Previously, I had developed a psychological profile based on the videos that we see. And I didn't necessarily think that I would be able to figure out who the person was until I sat one day and thought, we have so much information about this person, we can probably figure out who they are. One thing I found out was that you cannot hide court charges unless you're in a martial law situation. What this meant is if this person was a patriot, which we believe that they were, that there must be a paper trail out there for them. Because of this information, I spent weeks looking on Google for everybody who had been charged with espionage, willful retention of classified information, willful retention of national security documents, defense documents. And I looked at all the prominent cases that were out there. Nobody had checked the boxes until I ran into Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lynn. He checks every single box to be the leaker. Our government attempted to put him into prison for life as a traitor, but he is no spy. Edward C. Lynn is a hero. He took a plea deal after he was convinced that he had damaged national security, but he never revealed this information to our enemies. He simply wanted to do the right thing and tell the world the truth of this technology and what happened to MH370. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison despite taking a plea deal, and is likely bound to never be able to speak about the videos again. We can vindicate this man as well as everybody else who was lied to and discredited. I also want to point out some of the strongest evidence that Edward C. Lynn is the leaker, which includes the fact that he flew on the Navy Lockheed Martin EP-3 Ares 2 spy reconnaissance craft that he had experience in signals intelligence, which is what we believe is creating the 3D stereoscopic video through a network of information. He was the first major incident of espionage by an active duty member in the US Navy since the end of the Cold War. They heavily redacted his charge sheet, including the dates on the information that he had released, potentially because they would have linked directly to the videos. He was part of an he had a high level clearance and access to black program portfolio. And he was part of an airborne signals exploitation squad called the Special Projects Squadron 2. His deployment was from February 2014 to March 2016. He was arrested in September of 2015. The dates indicate that he would have been in the correct position to have seen the videos and potentially been there in person firsthand. This is one of the most secretive units in the service. There are quotes that this was not really a spy case and that the information that had been leaked to the public was obfuscated. There was no evidence in the NCIS investigation that Lin ever exchanged sensitive information with anyone from China or Taiwan. The defense attorneys argued that the classified information in question is available on the internet. The government responded that the information being available on the internet does not declassify it. Perhaps most damning, in 2014, Lin had accidentally left 2 flight manifests in his flight suit from a deployment that included search and rescue code names. As far as I can tell, the only situation that this would apply to is Malaysian Airlines Flight 370. So, Lieutenant Commander Edward Lin never spied on his country. He served faithfully in the United States government for 17 years, highly regarded as decorated officer. He accepted responsibility for the offenses that he was actually guilty of, and he agreed to debrief the FBI and NCIS. He said, "I get physically ill when I think about the damage I could have caused from my actions. I am exhausted and broken in spirit. The best thing I can do is serve as a cautionary tale for others." What I'd like to add is he was also abused while he was in pretrial detainment before he was ever took the plea deal. I want to let Edward C. Lin know that if you are Agent 370, you are not a traitor. You are a hero, and we salute you. Not just that, I am demanding a full pardon for this man from the United States president because of his heroic actions. He should not have been put in prison for 9 years over this. Now, going back to the letter, I also got a tip from a source that told me that the nephew of retired General Joseph F. Dunford had seen the videos and indirectly confirmed their authenticity. He was likely in charge of the operation as commander of the International Security Assistance Force in 2014. He then served as the 19th chairman to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, principal military advisor to the President, Secretary of Defense, and National Security Council from October 2015 to September 2019. Since then, he is now on the board of directors of Lockheed Martin. I'm not sure what happened to the passengers. It is scientifically possible that some of them survived. None of the families of the victims have reached out to me. I am operating under the assumption that they were either returned to their various countries in exchange for their silence, and that Philip Wood, the American passenger, may be in witness protection. I know that the videos seem impossible, but they are authentic. They are not CGI. We are able to show that the Citrix video is a Citrix session logged into the actual spy satellite database. Due to the frame rate discrepancy we see between the mouse and the background, the mouse is running at 24 frames per second, consistent with a screen recording of a Citrix session. The background satellite video showing a giant wide field of view is running at 6 frames per second. Also, hundreds of community VFX experts have analyzed the footage frame by frame, and not a single discrepancy can be found. The list of requirements to hoax the videos is practically impossible. I'll run through quickly the requirements. You have between 4 and 72 days, depending on whether or not you believe that Regicide Anon was involved. It's an original work with nothing to copy from. You have to know how to create realistic volumetric clouds, how to accurately animate the cameras, how the clouds form at low altitudes where we see these cumulus clouds, how to accurately light the volumetric clouds because the zap that goes off accurately illuminates the clouds in the foreground and the background. You would have to know how to recreate exactly what MH370 looks like, the turn radius of a Boeing 777 at the certain altitude in descent that we've shown are at maximum capabilities of the plane in a circle formation. where the plane would have been at the exact time at 1840 UTC, to have accurate coordinate shifts relative to this location, including how to animate those coordinate shifts. You'd have to know what the weather looked like in the Nicobar Islands because we looked at the weather satellite and it's consistent with the cumulus clouds within 1 hour of the event. How to accurately create the smoke trail coming from the plane and the particles in 2 different videos. What the thermal looks like at a level that would fool the experts. Better visual effects than Top Gun Maverick artists who posted on Reddit. Knowledge of military classified systems completely unknown to the public. That the military is using the Citrix session environment, and you'd have to know how to build in the frame rate difference that we just described into the Citrix session environment into your hoax. You have to know what specialized mouse they're using to move the coordinates around in this giant field of view to keep the picture of MH370 cropped within our field of view. You'd have to know what false color IR looks like in our satellite imagery. You have to know how to create 3D stereoscopic imagery that we can actually convert, and so you can look at the picture with red and blue glasses and see the 3D imagery. You have to know how to animate the orbs, including these orbs as they go through the smoke trail are accurately distorted. You have to be able to create the particle system for the orb's forward-facing gravity engine, we will call it. You have to know what the MQ-1C drone looks like, its payload, and you have to know that the payload, where the payload is located to get the exact camera angle. You'd also have to know not to use a 2D 90s video game visual effect in a 3D environment. Perhaps most importantly of all, you would somehow have to know that we would never find this plane 9.5+ years later. Otherwise, the entire hoax would break down. I believe all that information conclusively proves that these videos are authentic. These videos implicate the US government in a black budget reverse engineering program, a la whistleblower David Grush's sworn testimony to Congress. This information will shock you, and I hope you seek to expose the truth. This surpasses petty politics. Please help for the good of the country. This is a verifiable conspiracy. And while I believe it is being done because the forces that be think that the society will collapse if this technology is made publicly available, I disagree. We can handle this information. And the technology has the capability to change the circumstances of millions, if not billions of people on this planet. People that have nothing. What matters most in this world is the time that we spend in it with the people that we care about. Even if we reveal this information, that will not change. The reason I am requesting a public congressional hearing is because I believe that the weight of the evidence can convince enough people in Congress that the true events of MH370 were covered up by our own government, and that there's a black budget advanced technology program, most likely based on reverse engineered unidentified aerial phenomenon, also known as UAPs. Sincerely, Ashton Forbes. So that's the letter. And I think that that letter, when you listen to it, you can understand exactly why it is so compelling. So the next thing I want to go into real quick is the flight path. So from the flight path perspective, you can pull it up on Twitter. I put it in the replies. You can also, if you're watching on YouTube here, you should be able to see it firsthand on this flight path, and I will have it repeat several times. So the plane here is taking off from Kuala Lumpur, headed to Beijing, and it takes off at exactly 16:42 UTC, heads northeast. 17:21 UTC is the time of our first event. This is when the plane goes dark. This is when our lithium-ion battery fire ignites. This is when we have Mike McKay, who's on an oil rig, the first witness that we're going to vindicate, sees the plane on fire. At this point as well, and I'm going to pause it here in the YouTube video, this is where the people who are on the coast hear the loud bang, potentially consistent with this igniting of these lithium-ion battery fire and depressurization of the plane. 10 minutes later, as this plane is turning and going to the nearest airport, consistent with the Wired article's argument that the simplest solution is the best and that what happened would have been a fire, we see at 10 minutes after, at 17:30 UTC, is when the fishermen who are off the coast, 10 miles off the coast of Thailand and Malaysia, see a plane flying so low that it seemed very unusual. The explanation for this is that they're attempting to keep the passengers alive. If this had been some type of suicide scenario, the pilot would have just crashed this plane immediately. They would not be trying to fly below 10,000 feet, which would give the passengers enough oxygen to be able to breathe safely. So the plane continues over Malaysia until it gets to Penang at 17:52 UTC. It has been speculated that the plane could not land either due to the damage of the fire breaking containment, or also potentially due to the fact that it was not safe because the lights could have been off. Keep in mind that 1752 UTC is 1:52 in the morning. This airport potentially would not have been open to active planes at this point. If communications were actually shut off, they may have not had a way to communicate. The co-pilot's cell phone pings the local cell phone tower close to Penang at this time as well, indicating again that this is some sort of emergency event and they're trying to seek help. So what happens after this? After this point, the plane goes directly towards the Nicobar Islands from this location. The last official communication was at 1822 UTC, roughly 230 miles off the coast of Malaysia. From here, everybody agrees that the plane continued to where Catherine T, the witness's boat, was sitting underneath the plane. This is where Catherine T sees the glowing orange plane. She sees the plane very clearly, and I've talked to her recently, and she says the shape is the same. When I asked her about what time she thought she saw the plane, her time to me was 1840 UTC. This is also consistent with the earliest initial reports of when contact was lost with the plane. The time of 1822 UTC was not till weeks later, after the radar data had been made publicly available. This is plenty of time to fabricate an official story, alter the data as necessary in order to throw people off the scent. The 1840 UTC is the same time our satellite is in position, the same time that we believe that we are seeing these videos in the Nicobar Islands as indicated by the coordinates in the videos. The orange glowing plane, again, is consistent with the bromine gas from a chemical reaction of the halon fire extinguishing device, breaking containment and permeating the plane. So again, I believe that this information conclusively shows that what we're seeing in these videos is authentic, as difficult as it is to believe. So at this point, given all that information, that body of evidence, this is why we are requesting a congressional public hearing, that this should be plenty of information to be able to get an official investigation into this and to get the classified information that will verify the evidence to be true. At this point, I would like to go ahead and open the floor up to Mello. And what Mello is going to talk about a little bit before we talk to Roy about the science is community standards and why it's important to build a community that is a very positive one. So go ahead, Mello. And if you have any questions you want to ask before that potentially I missed, feel free.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I've been deeply immersed in your research and the research of the community for quite some time. So that all makes perfect sense to me. But though it is somewhat shocking still. I mean, it's quite a lot to figure out. And, whoever leaked those videos, right? I mean, I think we have a pretty good idea who, but, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the courage, the authenticity in terms of, looking out for fellow human beings and caring about the victims of, this horrible tragedy. I mean, who knows the full extent of what went on, but I mean, it's, it really speaks to the humanity and the heroic actions of, one or more individuals to bring this information to light. And I just want to reiterate my admiration and respect for all the people who put their minds together. I mean, look, it's been a sort of a community effort even before you and your team, Ashton, started collaborating on trying to put these pieces together. Even before it, I want to acknowledge the people, who've been all the journalists and all the people who've been trying to piece this mystery together now for years. So, it's with that spirit that, I've already kind of articulated some of these ideas that I personally have, and the sort of ethics that I feel about the importance of the citizens of the world, not those who are trying to, for whatever, maybe well-intentioned purpose, keep secrets from the world. It is to me, it's the right of humanity to know as much truth as possible. I mean, sure, there are certain things, maybe for national security, that should, maybe not be known by every single person. We don't all need to know how to make nuclear weapons, for example. But in terms of the fundamentals of reality and the nature of it, it feels to me to be a requirement that we all understand as much as possible, especially the scientists and the philosophers and all the different people who have different areas of expertise to contribute to the embetterment of humanity. If we don't have a basic idea of what's really going on around us, we don't really have a fighting chance to stay alive collectively. So, I've already kind of explained my take and philosophy on how I think the internet should work, right? And I've seen, since I've gotten involved with the community here and Twitter X, thank you, Space Daddy, for having us. I've seen, a lot of progress in terms of my ideals as to what the full potential of this virtual international town square can be. And I've, and I don't really want to. I feel very good about the way the community has been evolving and how it's been evolving in terms of your research, Ashton, and your teams. Your all the people who've been helping you piece this together and working together to do so. So, I just want to mostly thank people for being, the way I look at the internet and the way I aspire for it to be is not to be this thing, in terms of the way the algorithm was initially set up in 2007 by a person I won't name, because it was infinite potential at that point, right? But because of the way capitalism worked and because of whatever other external pressures, were kind of made to bear, it was set up in a way to sort of divide people based on their petty political differences or perceived, or maybe constructed differences and their other kind of small-minded things, right? It was not just, it was designed to be portrayed in these kind of, like let's say on Twitter, for example, in these very flash in the pan encounters where people kind of, without context, would just try to win points for their various echo chambers, and then the entire economy became based around it. That's how almost every single corporation and individual was going to succeed in the marketplace by winning quote unquote points by lashing out in this sort of tribalistic fashion. So when I see things, like the GameStop example, and I think the much more important example in terms of the research you've been doing collaboratively, Ashton, is that the idea that the truth is out there. There are those, we've heard of the truth embargo and things of that nature. There have been provable, coordinated efforts to keep the truth from the masses. And, I just am very inspired to see this kind of thing, as we continue to research and connect with top experts and journalists of the world who take this seriously. In the old paradigm, you would have the quote unquote experts, right? Those who were appointed, those who held certain political positions, certain gatekeepers, right? And that's not the
Surveillance
way
continues to be a critical national security space mission. The Cold War focus on strategic ICBM systems has expanded to include short and mid-range ballistic missile threats. The Defense Support Program maintains the legacy Cold Cybers, which is
the community. I'm mostly here to just sort of observe the extent to which it has already been
with deployment of the GEO spacecraft, Cybers will be an unprecedented resource
like
as the nation's global
and others who I spend a lot of time with, maybe a bit too much time with online. But I learned a tremendous amount from these people, and spaces is to me the most pristine form of this sort of dialectic that can be achieved through a universal or global at least dialectic where the best and brightest can come together and just be real. And I think that's what we're doing here. I'm not going to pontificate too much about it. I'm just really glad to be here and to learn from you all. And let's talk to Roy.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mello. I appreciate you jumping into that. And really what we're trying to build here is a community that's positive, that sets a standard that's far above that of the rest of the internet, when we're not trying to cut other people down, that we're not trying to cut down other people's beliefs and what they believe in. There's no basis or reason to have to try to tell somebody what they believe in is fake. All that does is create more negativity that's not necessary. And I think it betrays people's true intentions and their own lack of self-esteem. So that's part of the reason why what we're building here is going to be something special, because the people that are part of this community are going to be people that know the truth about what's happened here and the people that share that truth with other people. So I want to make sure that everybody acts with respect as much as we can. Especially the people that are naysayers and the people that don't believe. If we want people on our side, we have to be respectful to them.
Oh yeah, let me just add one more thing. So the conventional wisdom has been the internet is a place where you put on a mask. My mask is to reveal, not to conceal, not to demystify myself too much. But to me, it is a place where you can be your very best self, the most pure form of yourself. It's the one that goes out to the entire globe, right? And so, I suggest the possibility that when we go into Twitter X or any other platform of its kind, we don't simply, consider it to be a place where we can vent about all the injustices that we deal with as an individual in terms of our ego, but we consider the possibility, with Ashton and other people like that who have led by example, can be a place where we can aspire to be our best versions of ourselves collectively.
Awesome, Mello. Appreciate all your words. So at this point, we're going to move into science questions for Roy. So very happy and proud that we have Roy D. Herbert here with us, who's a theoretical physicist. So we've got some questions we're going to go ahead and ask him. So let's get started, Roy. First question is there a known scientific explanation for what we witness in these videos, given the data as provided as is?
Okay, if the data is verified, that is okay. That's the one. Yes, there is. What we are looking at here is what would be considered a transitional phase. Okay, a changing of state into almost superposition state. One could consider the Beck state as such, the phase of quanta. So yes, there is.
And just as a quick follow-up with that, how theoretically would we explain that they're able to do this to a 777 that's full of passengers? Would that actually require, as I speculated, this double-sided kind of electromagnetic layer, or can you think of any other theoretical application?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. It goes to the heart of a theory that I call dynamic behaviorism, in that there are properties denote the behavior. For example, if we look at certain states of things such as water, for example, we know it to be normal temperatures of fluid. Okay, if we decrease the temperature, the property of temperature, it will turn to a solid. If we increase the temperature property, it will turn to a gas. So the same thing can essentially exist as different states of existence according to the properties. Okay, so our properties denote the behavioral outcome. Now, what this goes to is some recent results by the LIGO experiment and the gravity experiment that they were doing with LIGO of observing two neutron stars colliding. Now, my hypothesis was that we know that neutron stars have an extended electron cloud. Now, an extended electron cloud is a property of quanta. Okay, so my hypothesis was that these things, these neutron stars, should hold that very, very cold, like Beck phase, the phase of quanta, due to that extended electron cloud, and that they share the same properties as quanta. Okay, so we can think of them, neutron stars, as huge atoms, essentially. And the LIGO results were quite conclusive in that we did see those transitional phases present. So it sort of proves that it doesn't matter about one scale. It doesn't matter how big you are. As long as you have electrons are orbiting you and in an extended cloud, you form this like phase. Now, we recognize this in the laboratory that we call superconductivity, in that once we apply certain properties to the actual material, the electrons become extended. Okay, this now leads to certain attributes of that like phase that we can hypothesize about. One of the theories is that there's a Meissner effect that causes the levitational attributes of superconductivity. But my thinking is that that phase of quanta, because of its very reduced properties as such, has a much faster relative rate of time, and that time and our relative rate have a direct correlation to gravity. And that's another one of my theories as well, in that I think that gravity is the result of dilation, stress, okay, and that we should consider time itself governed by the laws of conservational symmetry, in that the slower the flow of time, the greater the inertia of gravity, and the faster one's relative rate of time, the lower the inertia of gravity. Now, to explain those fluid dynamics at work, we can go to a stream, a usual thing we know. If we look to the banks, the slowing of the flow creates a passive transversal inertia that gathers the flotsam ashore. But if we look midstream at the fastest flow in the stream, there is no inertia. If one applies this to our principle of time, holding that faster relative rate of time therefore negates the force of gravity, giving you
and a
0g
speed
and a much faster relative rate of time, which correlates to what we see with UAP craft.
After instant.
So it doesn't just explain gravity, it explains UAP phenomena also. And that transitional phase as such can give us some explanation of what happened to the flight, in that those orbs, once turned to a transitional phase themselves, become quanta-like and are in orbit, and therefore the aircraft is considered quanta, just like a neutron star. Again, scale is not the issue. The properties denote the behavioral outcome.
Wow, that's a really awesome explanation, Roy. I think you just blew my mind, probably a lot of other people in here as well. So let's say that that's what's happening here in our videos. What would the attributes be of this aircraft if it's in this phase state?
Okay. Here we get to the difficult part, and we have the difficulty and the considerations of the families involved, in that if you were not isolated from that phase state, you would be in zero temperature. The property of temperature essentially does not exist in that phase, i.e. it's a simplified form of properties of existence. So you would be instantly frozen. Instant death, essentially. It would destroy everything within you. Also, the atoms within your body would have their electrons stripped from them and extended to that field, so that you would essentially meld with the apparatus and your seat and so on within the aircraft and become fluid-like. So unless isolated, I don't hold much hope for the passengers aboard. However, the lithium batteries that were aboard could significantly power a resistance to that and provide perhaps some isolation, in that normal magnetics, for example, can resist this phased matter as it's such, because properties such as things such as bismuth, for example, can resist all forms of electromagnetic energy, including this. And it is a form of electromagnetic energy, as is all things within our universe.
So what you're saying there, in layman's terms, that the batteries themselves could have acted as some sort of shield that would protect people that are nearby it, in a sense?
If you could positively charge the fuselage of the aircraft, for example, and you could perhaps provide some isolation. Yes, that is a potential.
Interesting. And then what about assuming that this plane has entered this phased state? What would it be able to do? Explain how potentially it's actually teleporting. I think you spoke to time, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's not teleportation as such. Okay, one changes one's state, so essentially you become different, completely different from normal matter. Okay, and as such you become much faster in time, 1,000-fold increase in one's relative rate of time. Okay, so imagine the aircraft was doing 200 miles an hour, say. Now times that by 2,000 to 3,000 instantly. You would not see the aircraft leave. It would be gone before your vision can even recognize it as such, because it was already in motion. Things that we see zip away that turn on that phase, okay, zip away gradually. And we see that linear type of motion. But this thing was already in motion.
That's pretty amazing. So then I guess the other part of this would be, what element of mass reduction and how does that play into what we see here? Because I think that a lot of people would argue there must be an inertial mass reduction in order for this to occur. Can you speak to that in any sense?
Yes, when one holds that phase, essentially one is removed from the larger scale, and therefore the normal scales of the space-time metric are different for us. We enter the realms and the laws of quanta, not no longer the larger scale. Much of that area is fraught with mystery, as my hypothesis is just going into it now. So it's a full mystery box of treasures to uncover.
That's pretty cool. And so I guess the follow-up to that would be, what kind of phenomenon can kind of emergent properties can come from this? I mean, are we talking about predicting the future here? And if so, to what levels and what scales can that be done?
No, we get the funny thing is for our universe is that we are abstractions in that fluid symmetry of time. And for us, there is only an eternal dynamic moment, okay, that one could consider to be a now. Okay, now that now can be extraordinarily short in length, perhaps as small as 10 to the minus 40, okay, and it can be extraordinarily long in length, and we see this within black holes. So one can consider black holes essentially as a time tensor cascade in that fluid symmetry of time, where a region of space-time can no longer come to a determination of what's actually there. And that moment will eventually reach a conclusion of its determination and blurt out that long forgotten moment as such. So time for us is only ever the moment of now. There is no time travel backwards or forwards. However, as quanta, that is not the case. And as certain forms of quanta and that behavioral phased quanta, there, as I say, the possibilities are now open for certain other things, in that certain forms of quanta, such as a photon, live outside the bounds of our emergent time, and that our emergent time essentially is born from something else, which opens a whole paradigm box of a paradigm of issues to cross, of that paradoxical issues and other bits and pieces. But that rabbit hole is perhaps for another time.
Yeah, so I guess what I would kind of then ask, I mean, do you think you really helped us to understand exactly what we're seeing from a scientific perspective? Is there anything else from, what would be the outcome of this? What it sounds to me is almost like a merging of how we can explain quanta versus macro, and how, a plane that's a 777 can have the same emergent properties that we would see from quantum mechanics. Are there any other thoughts that, you think you want to share with us that would be relevant or important?
Yes, you mentioned that the linear motion of the orbs and so on. Well, precedent to that zero inertia state, essentially, one gathers when one is in that phased state, and that you are no longer of the larger scale, is that any directed entropy will provide that dilation stress. Okay, in that we now recognize that gravity is born of that slowing of time. So any directed entropy of space-time, i.e. where you are slowing time in front of you, for example, microwaves in that inertia state, would provide you a tug. And therefore, but you are not moving, you are manipulating the space-time metric. So that basically means plus light speed, and Star Trek has begun.
And we're not talking about teleportation of dematerializing, rematerializing, right? We're talking about objects having their mass reduced to the point where they still are themselves, but they are just able to achieve properties that we would be at the quantum level only, right?
Yes, you don't change as such. It's just what the universe considers you to be. Okay, so you're pulling the wool over the universe's eyes by emulating the properties of quanta. Okay, which goes to how can you put it? This dynamic behaviorism points at essentially that our universe has a holographic paint method. Now leads to the ontological issues, as I said, in that one can override what one is within the universe. Okay. Now, yes. So that's what we're looking at potentially. So this leads, like I say, down a rabbit hole of what actually reality really is. In that, someone was expressing the thing that I think Twitter, we should be the best avatar that we can be on Twitter. I think we should take that home with us as well.
Yeah, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, and this is something that I've kind of held even before I saw these videos, is that there's strong evidence for what they call the holographic principle, which is that the universe itself is a simulation. I think the double slit experiment itself is where I first began to think that, because the only way I could interpret that is that the universe is somehow aware of itself. It's able to break its own speed limit, the speed limit of light itself. And then when we see this what I consider to be a reversal of those properties of taking something that is macroscopic and then converting it back to the wave function. To me, the one thing that explains that is essentially a simulation. And the reason why I
Yeah.
think that, go ahead, jump on in.
Yes, essentially, double slit experiment was personally was for me as well. In that, ultimately, what I was looking at, I found it must be deterministic, and ultimately, that's what we're thinking. Again, that moment of now is determined by the properties, the observer being a property of any moment. Okay, so yes, properties denote the behavioral outcome. What it means is essentially that we exist within a continuum of geometric symmetries within symmetries, essentially, and that is projected upon a gauge lattice, and that our emergent time is emergent for what one could consider to being a parental contextual domain, and that we don't need to think about things in dimensionalities or extra dimensions as such, but essentially just in context, so that we exist essentially as multiple things at the same time. Okay, we exist as pure information. We exist as physical matter as we know it. We also exist in the forms of quanta as well. So we exist in different things within this contextual continuum, projected within that fluid symmetry of time. And that projection essentially is realized within that eternal dynamic moment. And we can change what the universe considers us to be by mending our properties accordingly. And that now opens the Pandora's box that we can essentially play with the very fabric of matter and what reality really is.
That's really cool. And when I think about this, I think about the egg, which is a video that I posted several days ago, which the idea of the egg is that we're all the same person and that time is essentially an illusion. And that really what happens is that we're living out all of these lives, independent of what we would perceive as linear time. And it begins to break down the doors and generally of what reality even is. Honestly, to me personally, I've undergone a spiritual change, not necessarily just from this, but from the double slit experiment itself and coming to the idea that the world is a simulation. And that's why in the Relative Congress, I mentioned that I could see how the forces that be would think that this information could cause society to have major upheaval. But I would almost argue the opposite, is that this is actually pretty consistent with what religious beliefs are. And I think that people
As would
will,
I.
yeah, and I
as
think,
would
go
I.
ahead.
Because ultimately, any construct as such requires a constructor. Now, yes, we get into a chicken and egg scenario in that who created that, who created that, who created it. Nevertheless, the continuum, as it is, requires someone to actually start the ball rolling. So, those ontological issues for the theologies and so on have been resolved essentially in that science essentially is hinting at now that there may indeed be I won't call him God, I would call them the constructor essentially, but what that entity is up to anybody's interpretation. If one wishes to consider that divine, one is more than welcome to do so.
Yeah, it's a good thought, and I think that it's a kind of a beautiful thought in general. And then going back to the egg is, this idea that death is not the end, and that there's more to this world. That it's not a simplistic world. There's more to reality as we see it, and that's again part of the reason why I think this is so important, especially to go into the science behind it. One thing that I want to say to the people that are out there, the people that have had experiences, the people that have seen things that are unusual, is that part of the reason why I am so driven to show that these videos are authentic and real is it can validate those experiences. I have people that come and send me videos every day now that want me to look into their content, answer. And the answer is I don't have all the answers for people, you know. But what I do hope that happens is that as we prove these videos to be authentic, that it opens the door to looking at that information with a new light and a new eye and ends this era of ridicule that we have and cutting people down, because these things are very personal to people is what I've learned from being part of these communities for the past 8 to 10 weeks. So I want to change that. I think the people here have an opportunity to change the world in a way where the children and children's children will grow up in a world where none of us even recognize. So what I'd like to ask Roy, go ahead, Roy, jump on in.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment completely. It is a perceptual paradigm as such to get your head around some of this stuff. But it's very possible. Even taking UAP, for example, and using basic, speed, time, and distance, the basic levels of physics and math at that level, we can determine what's going on. For example, we know that that particular speed and its maneuvers are impossible within the known laws. But one of those variables, the variable of time, is much more flexible than we first considered. And if we now considered them to be faster in time rather than the speed, it now ticks all the boxes as such and answers all the problems.
Yeah, just kind of going to that from the scientific perspective and dialing it back from the spiritual perspective again, I think that one thing I found very compelling about your theory of dilation theory is how it simplifies everything, is that we don't need gravity in the equations as much anymore. And you can take that out and look at it just from a time perspective and a perspective of mass interacting with space-time. And I think that, theoretically could be the thing that unifies macro and quantum, at least in my mind. But I'm admittedly just an amateur physicist, which means that I just pretend.
Yes, yes, it does unify. But what we will see is we won't see a quantization of gravity, but we will see the effects of gravity on quanta, in that dilation stress will be realized as a tilt to the spin of quanta, like a spinning top, and it tilts slightly with that inertia. Okay, well, time itself is also governed by the laws of conservation, and therefore that residual dilation has an effect upon quanta, and we would call this thing a time tensor as such. And that was what I was mentioning about, we now consider black holes to be a time tensor cascade. We have actually published publicly. We didn't do it through the normal academic route because we face, as you can imagine, quite a barrage of doors in front of us, in that this is not Newtonian Einstein physics, but post-Newtonian Einstein physics, and corrects the misnomer essentially of the energy tensor of Einstein to being that of now of a time tensor. And because the foundations of physics are built upon that, there's a hell of a lot of resistance, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But it is published now, and it is formally published on Martin's account, my calculator. Like Einstein, I'm not the best at maths, okay, but I know a man who is possibly the best mathematician on earth, and his handle, he's on Twitter, he's called Uniservant. His name is Martin Gibson. And if you want to know the details of that quanta and all of those things, and the unification of the QFT and all of the variants involved in what I've been talking about, it's all available on Martin's account.
Well, you just hit the last point I was going to ask, which is if there's anyone you wanted to plug or anything else you wanted to mention related to your theory. So I'll give you one last chance in case you missed anything. So go ahead.
Well, no, I've got to plug Martin. He's my calculator. Without him, I'd be completely lost. And last 2 years, we've been collaborating together. Been absolute dream come true because, like I said, I've been bashing my head against the door for like 20 odd years, shouting. I realized dynamic behaviorism when I was actually coding. That was a long time ago. So yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and I want to go ahead and thank you because, over our conversations and having the ability to sit within several spaces with you, I think that you've helped me to understand physics in a way that I did not previously understand it. You've converted me to somebody who believes in dilation theory. I think that it's a really beautiful theory that kind of simplifies everything in a way that I didn't think was previously possible. So I just want to let you know that you've become my favorite physicist on the planet. So thank you very much.
I did send a copy of the abstract for dilation theory, in that some of it, as you can imagine, as I mentioned, provides some ontological issues and does provide answers towards UAP technologies. Okay, so it's issue. I did send one off in October to one of the world's leading scientists for his 100th birthday. I won't name him because he it's all those issues. But his reply was, its simplicity is utterly elegant. And that was it.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Elegant. That's it. So it doesn't surprise me that you face resistance. From what I've seen from academics, I think that the biggest thing that they could do is open their minds and get away from this idea that everything they're taught is everything that there is. And look to actually explain what's around us. What science really is the explanation of reality as we see it, testing
Yeah.
what we see, right?
Yes, one should take nature as your guide, not the book. Okay, the book was written by man and not nature, and it's around us everywhere. But one has to pay attention to what it's actually telling you. For example, there's a fountain, a novelty that you can buy that you burn incense upon, and it has an aperture. And I recommend everybody to get one. Okay, they're absolutely earth-shattering. Reality will come home to you if you watch this thing long enough. Okay, in that what's happening is that the smoke is forced to share linear properties of motion, and in doing so, that invokes that conservational symmetry of dynamic behaviorism that I'm mentioning, and that it will turn that smoke into a form of liquid. Okay, now this is hot smoke. So the hot smoke is now defying the laws of convection and falling like a fluid. So this dynamic behaviorism is very, very much more powerful than all the laws in nature. Okay, and it is the root and base, essentially the first law of our cosmos. And hopefully it will be a Nobel Prize, but I don't hold my head out too long for it. Probably
Well,
way after I'm dead.
I'll be on your side rooting for it, to be honest with you. So, Roy, thank you once again for being here. I think we're all grateful for your time and being here to help explain us the science behind what we think we see in the MH370 videos. Once again, I'm really grateful. And at this point, I'd like to ask if Mello, you have any last thoughts? I think how we're going to close this out is we're not going to take questions here today. We will do that potentially in a different space. I want to keep this pretty concise so that I can post it to YouTube as well, so additional people can watch and become armed and educated. So, Mello, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
I just want to express my gratitude for everyone here. Roy, it's you speak so beautifully about the nature of reality, and there's such to me such authenticity and poetry to the way you speak, and I just it's just very humbling to be around so many well-intentioned people who want to just in our limited time, in our limited lifespan, to just try to know the truth, and not to assume we understand everything, but just to inch closer towards an understanding of it. And I feel like I've inched closer, and it's 100% because of you guys, and the greater community that I learned from all the time. I mean, it's might conventionally speaking might not sound so amazing to say, hey, I learned so much from my time on Twitter X, but I truly do, and it's because of this way I pursue it, through algorithmic jujitsu of spaces like this. It's a algorithm free environment. Once we've arrived here, once we found each other, we're just speaking, we're just communicating. It's a dialectic, it's an exploration, and I find it to be profoundly beautiful, and the thing that could not exist in any other time in history. So I have nothing.
You want to plug anything?
No, nothing to plug. I have some music to play for our outro whenever you guys are ready. But no, I mean, I can't possibly add anything more than what you guys have already shared. That is, more profound and substantive.
Well, we appreciate you being here too, Mello. So what I would say to close it out before Mello plays a little bit of music to just kind of lighten the mood as we exit the space here today is I want to thank all of the contributors who are out there. I actually have a piece where I thanked the most major contributors that I was able to get. If you feel like you were not part of that, you feel free to reach out to me. I want to make sure that we do get everybody, because this is the first ever community-led investigation that will potentially unravel the largest, biggest conspiracy of all time. We are setting a precedent that has never been set before, and that people don't even know how to deal with the type of information that we're putting forward and the amount of effort that we have put together as a community. So everybody who's contributed, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. For all the people who followed from the beginning, and I see you all in the space right now, I want to thank you as well for being here. You are the ones who I'm arming with this information. The reason why we're doing this is so that you can be armed with this information to pay it forward to everybody else who's out there, to turn as many people as we can to see the truth. What we demand is the truth on our timeline. We will not adhere to anyone else setting the narratives. We will have the evidence out there so stacked it so high that it is undeniable. The longer that the media and everybody else waits to respond to it, the more implicated in the cover-up they will be, and the less likely we will be able to take them seriously, and the more excuses they're going to have to give to us in order for us to listen to them. We're not the ones that have to present our case to them. They're the ones that are going to have to present the case to us for why they've been lying about this information for so long. So lastly, again, I want to thank everybody who was here today. We are setting the highest possible standard for a community that we can. To the people that I haven't seen eye to eye with, I want to extend an olive branch for you guys as well. I want you to know that even though we haven't seen eye to eye, we still have the same goals. We are still trying to get to the truth. We are still trying to, get that disclosure, what I would consider true disclosure. And lastly, this may be the last opportunity any of us have in our lifetimes for true disclosure, not from the government or any other officials, but from the public, the people that found the information and demanded that it be free. And the reason for that is that beyond this point, we've proven these videos are from 2014, before the time of deepfakes, before the time of artificial intelligence that can just recreate anything on a whim, right? In this time going forward, everyone will always consider, oh, well, that could have been faked. I always see it in my DMs or in my messages right now and replies, right? So that's the reason why we're so passionate. That's why the people in here are so driven towards it, is that we know this might be our last chance, and we will not miss this opportunity. I will not let you down. Thank you guys very much.